we have low self-worth and low self-love, we're probably going to attract people who treat us that same way and reaffirm what we already believe about ourselves. And there's so many people who are wanting to that feeling of being chosen because we think love is outside of ourselves, but really it's about learning to source it from within, to choose yourself first, and then to choose healthy, aligned relationships from there.
Welcome back to the Power and Purpose podcast. I am Vanessa Soul. Thank you so much for investing your time and your energy into tuning in to today's episode. I'm super excited for our guest. We have Megan Sherer. She is a somatic therapist, an author, and a speaker. Megan, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Vanessa. I'm so excited to be here.
Absolutely. Who are you and who are you not?
When I think about this question, the first thing that comes to mind for me is the word love. Love is something that I've centered my whole life around teaching, teaching myself how to love better, teaching my clients in the work that I do with somatic attachment, trauma healing. And I think that there's a lot we get wrong in the world when it comes to love. So my kind of mission on this planet is just to be somebody who embodies the spirit, the energy of love, and really expanding that definition beyond the definition that most people are used to, which is that of romantic love. So who am I not? I guess anything, what's the opposite of love? Oftentimes I feel like it's said the opposite of love is fear, but I'm still a normal human being who has fear. So I think that's the best I can do to sum that up for now. But like all humans, I'm also more complex than that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I'm just curious because you dropped something in there. You said we oftentimes get things wrong about love. And just a small snippet, like what do you think that is? I know it's different for
Mm.
everyone, but what do you think that's what it is?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think that most people, we're sort of societally conditioned to pedestalize romantic love. So we see that as being like the only kind that matters or matters the most. And what I often see in my work, and also, went through this journey in my own life, is that because of that, people often end up getting into relationships for all the wrong reasons. We get into a relationship because we're afraid of being alone. We get into a relationship because we want to feel chosen and we want somebody else to love us. We get into a relationship because we want to make the day-to-day realities and financial burdens of this capitalistic world feel easier. We get into a relationship for all of these reasons that aren't based in love and alignment and authenticity and truth. And when we do that, we often get in the wrong relationships. So, yeah, I think that we could go so much deeper in that, but that's where I see most people getting love wrong is choosing to pursue it for the wrong reasons.
100%, I agree. And it's so important to raise this awareness. And I know we're probably going to be talking about so many other different things in this conversation besides love, but since we're here, I'll just tell you my thoughts and you can tell me what you think too.
Mm,
Where I feel like we're misaligned or wrong with love, I like to use the word misaligned, is that we think it's like outside of us. We think it's like
mhm.
over there with them, mom, dad, over there, outside of me. We don't really realize consistently that it comes from within. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's spot on. I mean, we have to learn that we are the source of the love that we seek from other people. And it doesn't start out that way. And this is where I think most people get confused because when we come into this world and we're little tiny babies, like we do need our parents to love us. We need the people around us to love us and nurture us so that we grow into wonderful, amazing adult human beings. And when we don't get that, when there are attachment relationship ruptures in those early years, that's where a lot of these kind of different definitions and misunderstandings of love get askew. But really, at the end of the day, we're the only ones as adults that can give ourselves the love that we're seeking, and any relationship outside of us just is a mirror of that, right? It just gets to be a reflection of what we've already cultivated within. If we have low self-worth and low self-love, we're probably going to attract people who treat us that same way and reaffirm what we already believe about ourselves. And this is a lot of the work that I do there's so many people who are wanting to that feeling of being chosen because we think love is outside of ourselves, but really it's about learning to source it from within, to choose yourself first, and then to choose healthy, aligned relationships from there. So yeah, you're
Mm,
spot on.
so powerful. Yeah, thanks for expanding on that too. It's such a great reminder. The more aware of this stuff, just the more we can expand and stay in alignment at the same time.
Hmm.
So beautiful. You have an interesting story about your journey, before you got to where you are today. I always like to touch on it a little bit with people. And so what really caught my eye is these back-to-back traumas in your early 20s. What was that like and what was happening?
Yeah, that period in my life is definitely the first sort of big spiritual awakening that I had, first big catalyst for deep inner work and deep personal growth in my life. Prior to that point, I had done sort of the surface level personal development work of like reading self-help books, and I had gone to therapy because I had been in treatment for an eating disorder and was learning about anxiety and things like that, but I hadn't really gone deep with it yet. And I don't know that I would have necessarily chosen to right away had those back-to-back traumas not happened. So when I was 22 and 23, I was in a traumatic car accident. I was hit by a drunk driver, and the ramifications of that accident lasted years. I had physical and mental symptoms that lasted years after that, which was a massive challenge. But at the same time, I was also dealing with the experience and implications of being in an emotionally abusive relationship at the time, having had experienced sexual trauma outside of that relationship, having had this whole destabilization of my life, my income, my career because of the accident and everything else that was happening. So it was this major identity shift. Like the version of myself I saw myself as prior to that, which was this very type A, driven, perfectionistic, motivated, get stuff done, like handle shit type person, I couldn't show up as that version of me anymore. And I didn't know what to do or where to go from there, to be totally honest. It really forced me to seek answers that were to ask questions and seek answers that were much bigger than anything I had had to explore prior to that point. And it's what led me on the path that, I've been on now for over 12, going on 13 years of somatic work and working with the nervous system and deep spiritual work and so many beautiful facets of the healing work that I've gotten to experience myself and that I now teach and share. But yeah, it was definitely a result of a lot of adversity first.
Mm, yeah. And I think we could all relate to adversity leading us onto these paths of awakening and shaking up our lives. And typically there's a lot of loss
Yeah.
or grief, even if we lost parts of ourselves, which tends to happen in an unhealthy relationship like the one that you mentioned. I'm just curious, what was the first step out of that energy? And you may not
Mm.
have known what the first step was while you were in it, but now looking back, was it a somatic session? Like what was the first step out of it or
Mm.
towards this new path?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it probably is a combination of a few steps. I do remember a moment that comes to mind when you ask the question. Um, with the relationship in particular, it sort of hit a point where I knew how detrimental it was to my well-being. I knew it wasn't sustainable. I knew I couldn't do it anymore, but I also felt like I was at a place where I couldn't leave. I kind of felt powerless to leave. And I got on my knees one day and just prayed, like, please take this relationship away from me. Please end it if this is meant to be done. Like, please do it for me because I can't do it. And at that point, prior to that point, I didn't really have any relationship with God or spirituality. That was really a kind of starting point for me in exploring my own spiritual beliefs and journey. Um, and very shortly after that moment, the relationship sort of did implode on its own, and he was, in many ways, the one to withdraw and make it make it a clearer ending in a way that I couldn't. And I really needed that. And it allowed me to get enough breathing room to start to remember who I was again. I had lost so much of myself in that experience, in the car accident experience. And I was very fortunate that there were a couple people in my life at the time who worked in the healing space. So I started to explore everything from Reiki and energy healing to somatic healing and NLP. I had a nice community around me of more holistic practitioners. I was living in LA at the time, so it's sort of like a hub for those sorts of practices. And I think that was really important for me because it showed me what was possible beyond just talk therapy wasn't helping me anymore. And I knew I needed something different.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Like, why do you feel like talk therapy isn't enough for lasting change and transformation?
Yeah. At the time, I didn't know. I felt like, what's wrong with me? That this thing that's supposed to fix people and help people isn't really working. Like, I'm aware of all my problems, but I still feel stuck in these patterns. And it's really kind of immobilizing. And I know now, as a practitioner, over a decade in, that the reason that there's that sort of upper limit or ceiling to talk therapy is because it's only working with the cognitive rational mind, right? We're only working with our intellect, which is really only about 10% max of the equation when it comes to creating interchange and personal transformation. So much of our daily habits, beliefs about ourselves, behaviors, actions, relationships that we choose, jobs that we stay in, that all stems from the subconscious mind and the nervous system in the body. And to create a deeper awareness of what's going on in my subconscious, what's going on in my body, actually feeling things instead of just intellectualizing them and talking about them in therapy, that is harder. It's much harder work. And it's not something that's as normalized in Western culture. So I think it's harder to get access to an understanding of that as well. I mentioned earlier we pedestalize romantic relationships. We also pedestalize the mind, the brain, the intellect, and thinking about things and rationalizing and analyzing. And we really minimize the wisdom of the body. So that was why, and I just didn't quite know it yet at the time. I wasn't understanding what was going on in my nervous system and how trauma had impacted my body and my nervous system and subconscious beliefs.
Mm, so powerful to really like have that awareness and make the distinction. And I agree with you. It's like that addiction to the mind because
Hmm.
sometimes it's like our dominant field sometimes, or and it may be because things can become tangible. Like we could think of an
Yes.
idea and then we can like turn it into form. So sometimes we rely a little bit too much on the mind, like
Hmm.
I'll believe it when I see it type of thing, or just like that heavy logical. And then also our society just encourages that too.
Hmm. And it
And
feels like what we have control over too. Like,
there we go. Yeah.
because like you said, it's our immediate reality. It feels like I can control it. Like maybe if I just change my thought, everything will be better. And there's something to be said for changing our thoughts, that like, and our self-talk, that's huge. But we don't realize what's impacting the thoughts that we're having, and the self-talk that we're having is what's going on in the body and what's unfelt in the nervous system. And most people are uncomfortable with being with big emotions because that feels out of control, and being with the
Yes.
mind feels more, I'm in control.
Yeah. And then when I left my unhealthy relationship where I gave away a
Mm,
lot of my power, I didn't even know what PTSD felt like. I didn't even know I was experiencing it until looking back. Um, and it's a very mental process.
mhm,
I know the nervous system is also, yes, your nervous system is just regulated, most likely if someone's having PTSD. Yes, there's unprocessed emotions, suppressed emotions. I'm an energy worker. So, yeah, suppressed anger, sadness, all of that. But it was also just like this mental haunting every day. Even
mm,
taking a shower was like this deeply mental process where I'm like trying to like like not stop a thought, but just like hear it, process it. What do I do? Do I keep showering? Like just like, just it was just like that was my PTSD, at least for the first 2 months
Mm,
fresh out of the relationship. It got a lot better. I didn't stay like that for long. Um,
yeah.
but do you have any thoughts on that? That like that kind of experience? Because I think that that might be somewhat common for people who leave the relationships. They still have that mental chatter, or sometimes it could be a little bit more definable as something like PTSD.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, anytime we end a relationship, like anybody who's gone through a breakup knows how challenging it is to try to move on from that person that you shared a life with, especially if you were with them for a long time, or even if it was a short time, if it really dominated your day-to-day experience. And like you acknowledge, there's multiple layers of that. There's maybe some dysregulation in the nervous system if it wasn't a safe or healthy relationship, probably a lot of unprocessed emotions that didn't get a chance to be expressed during the container of that relationship. And it is also important to understand what's going on in a brain and subconscious level. So when you are spending all of your time with this person, getting to know this person and their thoughts and their beliefs and their likes and dislikes, there you're essentially creating all of these very well-worn pathways in the brain. You're creating these neural pathways that link not just that person and the memory of them, but who you were in that moment in time. So the version of you that you were becoming as you were with them, whether you were growing in ways that you really liked or losing versions of your parts of yourself and becoming a version that you didn't recognize anymore, that's all woven together in your brain with the memory of them and then the context of what you were doing at the time. So the song that was playing when you guys were together, or the food you always went out and ate together, your brain's cataloging all of that. And, to your point, it can be so easy to end up in a moment where you're in the shower and you're flooded with this intrusive, maybe overwhelming thought cycle about them, and then maybe questioning, was it the wrong thing? Should I get back together with them? What do I do? What does this mean? Right? Because our brain's trying to make sense of that person not being in our life anymore when there's all those neural pathways that were built around them. So when we acknowledge that like, oh, okay, this isn't just like I'm not able to get over them because there's something wrong with me, or I'm obsessing over them and I just need to like get over it. It's actually the way that I have wired these parts of my brain and nervous system. And it's going to take time to prune, to unwind those neural pathways and create new ones, create new pathways, beliefs, and memories of your own that are distinct and separate from them. And like you said, after 2 months, you noticed, okay, now it's starting to get better. That's sort of one of those catch 22s of like people always say time heals all wounds. Time really helps when it comes to creating the space to build new neural pathways, but we also need consistency and repetition. So if in those 2 months, all you're doing is checking their social media, looking to see if they've texted you, continuing to feed your brain and emotional body reminders of them, you're not going to make much progress in getting over them in those however many months. You need to be actively working on healing and addressing the wounds that showed up in the relationship, discovering more clarity about who you want to be in this next chapter of your life, what you want, the new hobbies you're picking up. So it's really about how we use that time as well. And then if there was maybe a trauma history there and a lack of safety in that relationship, like you mentioned, PTSD, um, that's always something I recommend working within the context of a professional who can support you, because that's not something we unravel on our own. That's something we really need a safe, trained, loving witness to help us through.
Yeah, I can't believe I did a DIY.
Right? It's so much harder. I know. I look back on some of the chapters of my life. I'm like, I was just like winging it. Wow, that
Right.
was really, really crazy.
Yeah, and like I said, I didn't really know, because you know how it is in an unhealthy relationship. There's so much
Mm,
intensity.
yeah.
Chaos is like a part of it's a Tuesday. So
Yeah.
even though there wasn't chaos with the other person, it was internal mental chaos, and that was still
Hmm.
somewhat normal in a sense. But and I won't go too much into this, but just to kind of, if anyone's curious about how that, what I did during those 2 months, and I wouldn't recommend this for anyone. I think I was guided by the universe because it was
Mm,
just my medicine at the time. But I I did meditation. I wouldn't recommend meditation for people who are going through PTSD. I think you need to get into the body and not really just close your eyes and sit with your thoughts. It might feel a little bit more intense.
mm,
But I don't know, I created my own process, and that kind of led me into whatever was next for me. And then I think I started to do cold plunging, which
mm.
is for me, it is a nervous system regulation tool. I know it's not that for everyone, but for me it is. So once I kind of like started to make that progress, that's where I started to go. So if anyone was curious on like how that story started to unfold, but let's reel it back in. I want to talk to you about and get your opinion on the attachment styles. And what are your thoughts on that? And how can we raise some awareness, or like, yeah, what's your perspective on the attachment styles?
Yeah, I think that for anybody who doesn't know, for anyone who's listening and hasn't heard of attachment styles or attachment theory, um, it's essentially an understanding of how our earliest bonds with usually our parents or primary caregivers, and how safe or unsafe, present or unpresent, nurturing or not nurturing those relationships were, how that impacts our adult relationships that we form. And the reason that most people do know about attachment styles these days is because it's gotten super trendy over the last few years on social media. And while that's great on the one hand, because it can help us build self-awareness around our patterns, it can help us make sense out of like, oh, no wonder I always feel so anxious when somebody pulls away or when I'm assuming they're pulling away, because I can map that back to an insecure attachment from childhood. Or no wonder I get guarded and kind of close off, push people away when they get too close. I can map that back to enmeshment in childhood, right? It can help us make sense of why certain patterns have shown up in our life. Now, where I think that most people um, kind of stop too soon, where this awareness isn't helpful, is because they then sort of latch on to the attachment style that they've identified with as a label or like a diagnosis. Like, I'm anxiously attached. This is just the way I am. And so you need to change all these behaviors because I'm anxious, or I'm avoidant. And so you can't get too close. We affix the label to ourselves without taking responsibility for understanding where it comes from, having the awareness of what are the core attachment wounds that led to this attachment pattern in the first place, and then also understanding that an attachment style is something that is plastic. So we have the ability to create what's called earned secure attachment. So no matter what your attachment patterns are, and for most people, it's a blend. Like, most people aren't purely anxious or purely avoidant or disorganized. It usually is relationally dependent, and so depends on the circumstances and relationship that you're in presently. Um, but that can all be adapted. We can all work towards more secure attachment patterns, really by going back to those core wounds and understanding what's going on in the nervous system and in the subconscious. So I think that the awareness of attachment styles is a really great starting point. And then the
Mhm.
question is, what are we doing with this information from there?
Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought up core wounds, because you talk about the 8 core wounds that can keep people stuck in unhealthy relationships. What are those 8?
Mm, okay, that would be a multi-hour deep dive to go into to all of them, but some of the most common ones that people might feel some resonance with or have familiarity with would be something like the abandonment wound, for example.
Yeah.
Um, and the abandonment wound is one that can show up not just when there was physical abandonment, like a parent left me when I was young, but also if there was emotional abandonment, like maybe my parents got divorced and then one parent was sort of emotionally absent after that, or if there was alcoholism in the family and there was an emotional abandonment because of the parent who was dealing with their addiction. So it's not always as kind of straightforward as the name of the wound. But what that can often show up as then in adult relationship is patterns of codependency. So sort of again, self-abandonment, self-sacrifice, giving away ourself to prioritize connection with another so that we feel loved and don't feel the pain of that original core wound. But what ends up happening is we often choose partners, and this can also be true in friendships, but it's more true in romantic partnership. We'll choose partners who mirror or mimic that original core wound, usually with the parent who we had either the most emotional charge with or the most unresolved wounding with, unrepaired wounding with. We'll choose somebody who reflects that person or that pattern because that unhealed, unintegrated part of us is seeking wholeness, is seeking completion. And it's like, if I can get this person who subconsciously reminds me of the pain that parent caused me, if I can get them to choose me and to love me and to stay and not leave me, then it'll make it better that I felt abandoned by my parent. That's what the subconscious is doing. That's what our psyche is doing. But it doesn't work that way, unfortunately. We again often choose people who just perpetuate the wound and who reinforce that belief of, oh, see, I'm unlovable. This person left me again. And then the next person left me again. So it must be because I am just somebody who gets left. I'm somebody who's worth being abandoned. And then we abandon ourselves over and over again in the process instead of going straight to the core wound, understanding this constellation of parts that show up to protect and support us around that wound, and to be able to come back more into that core self energy is what we're hoping to do. So that's one example. There's, also the let's say the betrayal wound. So that's one that is common for a lot of people who are experiencing like infidelity, being cheated on in their relationships as an adult. And that can often be mapped back to childhood where there were major betrayals. So maybe one parent cheated on the other, maybe there was a lot of lying in the household, just a general sense of instability or dishonesty. And that gets played out again in our relationship. So sometimes it's not even how a parent treated us, it's what we saw modeled, and we're unconsciously trying to repair what was broken there. Like, dad cheated on mom, and so now I'm attracting somebody who cheats on me so I can fix that wound, right? We're doing it this really roundabout way. And that is why people stay in these really unfulfilling and sometimes unhealthy relationship cycles again and again and again, because they don't realize that's what they're doing, but it feels so attractive and alluring. Like you mentioned earlier, that sort of intensity of toxic relationships, that intensity is the wounding, that emotional charge that's telling you, like, this reminds me of childhood, this is familiar. But we make it mean like they must be my soulmate. That's why I'm feeling this intensity. And so we stay longer than we should. And yeah, it goes on and on.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's powerful to understand this stuff and to unpack it and yeah, just to bring awareness around it too. Yeah, that betrayal wound, that was one of mine. And I feel like, I think everyone understands the abandonment one,
Mhm.
maybe because maybe I don't know if it's more popular. I don't know if everyone has to experience that. But then yeah, just and so some people are like, I've interviewed
Mm.
right? It's like take a break, but just stay self-aware and see what happens. Just stay open. But yeah, so much good stuff here. And then are there different types of love that we can experience, access, that type of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned earlier that we put this idea of romantic love on a pedestal, we make it the most important. And it can feel like if I don't have that, then somehow my life's not complete or I'm not enough. But really, there are multiple types of love that are equally as important for us to draw from. So there is romantic love, and I'm not knocking it. Romantic relationships can be a wonderful, beautiful, healing, expansive type of relationship in our life. And we also have platonic love, that deep, rich love with our friends. We have familial love, the love that we share with could be parents or siblings or nieces and nephews or chosen family. Communal love, so the love that we build in and around our communities and that sense of being woven into the fabric of something bigger than ourselves. Um, we have what I call higher love. So that could be your relationship between you and whatever higher power you believe in, God, source, the universe, nature, spirit, like environment, whatever makes you feel less alone. That is a really incredibly important um, type of love to cultivate in our lives. And of course, we have self-love, the one that most of us forget about in that list of types of love, because we always externalize and think about other. But, we started this episode talking about how it all really comes from within, anyways. And so, in any given chapter of our life, if we have at least two of those types of love, we can feel fulfilled. We can feel whole and complete. If we have three, bonus, like that's amazing. We're going to feel like even better about our day-to-day life. If we've got all of them, that's just like gravy, beautiful, amazing. We are firing on all cylinders. But I think there's a misconception that, again, we need a partner first and foremost. And then if we don't also have good friends, good family, good community, all these things, then it's not enough. If we just take a beat to acknowledge the love that we can cultivate with ourselves here and now and with the people who are in our lives, regardless of our relationship status, regardless of if we're in a place where we're surrounded by lots of friends and community or not, can we resource just two of those types and double down on nurturing two of them? And then look at where there are opportunities to grow. So maybe I'm really feeling a little bit of a gap in the realm of friendship or community. Maybe I moved to a new town and I don't know anybody here. That tells me I need to double down on investing in new relationships, building that sense of community and love for the place that I am, love for the people that I'm surrounded by. And it takes time, just like a new relationship does, to nurture and cultivate that. But I really believe it's important to remind ourselves that we're not missing anything or lacking. We're not less than if we don't have all of the categories of love firing all at once. I think most people don't in any given season of their life, right? There's sort of an ebb and flow to it. And if you take stock of what you do have and then look at what do I want to nurture more of, that's a beautiful place to start.
So good. So good. I love that you broke it down. Yeah, we forget about the self-love
Mm-hmm.
so much. And that higher love is, I think that's one of my favorite. And that's probably what started to present itself, or maybe I just started to access it some way or another. I don't know if it was breath work. I don't know if it was ayahuasca. I don't know if it was my meditations, but I do remember a distinct difference when that started to take place, and that was right after that relationship I mentioned. Shortly after,
Mm-hmm.
not immediately. It started to anchor in slowly, but yeah, I love that you're saying like really be present with the types of love that you have, and to me that sounds like an abundance mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you only feel like you're really strong in community love, instead of thinking like I'm lacking the self-love, I'm lacking the love from God or with nature or whatever, I'm lacking the relationship. It's like just hone in on that one. And I love what you're saying, like two or three is kind of like it's a good thing to be aware of, that will kind of give us more of an experience with love, because we're just here for experience, right? It's,
Mm-hmm.
well, that's one perspective.
I
But yeah,
agree.
if you're just experiencing one, like appreciate that, have gratitude for it. I think that's what Megan said in so many other words, and I just want to kind of to say it in my own way.
Yeah, thank you for Vanessa for summing that up. I think that is such a great perspective on how it's almost something that we can like play with. Like you said, like we're here for experience. So if you're not experiencing what you want to be and you take that inventory, take stock, then you get to ask yourself like, okay, great. What experience do I want to create? Let me amplify what I already have and just kind of translate it into these other areas, these other categories that I might feel like I want more over there.
Yeah, beautiful. And how can somatic exercises or somatic therapy assist us, either with love or just healing in general, reclaiming ourselves in general?
Mm. I mean, I can't recommend it highly enough. Everything that we've been talking about so far, all this healing really does happen in the body. And I mean, when you think about love, love happens in the body. Love isn't just a thought, love is that overwhelming feeling in the body, or that calm, grounded, peaceful feeling in the body. Love is expressed through your body when you open your arms wide to hug somebody that you love, or when you put your own hands on your heart. And if you are somebody like many people who is living maybe a little bit numb, dissociated, or disconnected from your body because of past trauma, or just because of the fast pace of our world and the way that our society is set up to kind of keep us disconnected and a little numb, then you're not giving yourself the opportunity to feel the full effects, the impact of that love that you could be experiencing. And I will acknowledge that again, the reason that most people aren't doing that is because the flip side of feeling the love and the joy and the connection and the bliss is also the willingness to feel the pain and the discomfort and the hurts, all the reasons from our past that feel like very valid reasons why we're guarded, why we've closed our heart because we were hurt, we were burned in the past, we were betrayed in the past. And it takes a willingness to be with those feelings again in order to amplify our experience of love as well. So I just want to acknowledge that it's brave. It takes a lot of courage. It's hard. It's going to happen in waves and layers. There's ups and downs, and it's not something that we just do once and get right. It's a daily practice, but it's one that I think is the whole point of why we're here. Like we came here to be in a body and experience what it's like to be a human with all these senses, love included. So that is kind of why somatic work helps, is because it's the introduction to getting back into our body, back into our senses, back into our emotions, and really learning to speak the language of our body and of our nervous system so that it doesn't feel like this foreign enemy anymore.
Yeah. And um, grounding. I think that grounding is such an important part of integration or healing or self-awareness or whatever it is, or coming back to yourself. And it's kind of, to me, it seems like it's kind of automatically embedded with somatic
Mhm.
exercises, because as soon as you come into the body, you're doing grounding. But are there other specific exercises that are more helpful with the intention of grounding, like certain
Mhm.
types of somatic exercises that would serve that intention a little bit more?
Absolutely. Yeah, because there are certainly somatic practices that are more activating, more energetically charged, and can feel not destabilizing, but can feel intense almost. And so, if you're in a place where you're looking for more grounding, more safety, more calm in the body, a few that I recommend, one is actually like just getting into the ground, like getting out in nature if you can, and laying in the grass, putting your feet in the earth, and using that as a reference point. Like one of my favorite things to do whenever I'm feeling a little bit dysregulated or overwhelmed is I'll go to a local park, lay face down in the grass, and just feel like fully held up and supported by the ground, and feel my belly breathing into the earth, and just imprint that feeling of like something's holding me. There's something so solid beneath me that has me. I don't have to hold it all together. I don't have to hold myself up all the time. So using nature as a resource can be really valuable. And then another great grounding practice for most people, I say for most people because we all have different bodies and different trauma histories, so they'll feel different in every unique body. But a practice called havening, which is essentially just applying really light self-applied touch. So you can use your hands to kind of trace along your arms, along your face and neck and collarbones, and just begin to make contact with your body in a very gentle, soothing way. And you can use more firm touch if you want to like give your arms, your neck and shoulders a little bit of a squeeze, a nice massage. That can feel very grounding as well. I'd say, yeah, there's so many, but havening is one of my favorites.
Havening, spell that.
Yeah, so like haven,
Okay.
Haven, and then ing.
Ah, okay, beautiful. I love that.
Like a safe haven.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, amazing. All right. And then are there any other practical tools? That was great, by the way, for somatic practices and
Mhm.
grounding and connecting, whether it's journaling or any or reflection or any other types of practical tools that people can do.
Yeah, I love journaling. I'm a huge fan of it. I write in my journal almost every day, and I will always remind people that journaling is a cognitive process. Like
Right.
we're in our heads usually when we're journaling and cognitively processing, which is great because we can sort of get what's in our heads out onto paper. I often recommend bookending journaling with somatic practices so that you can see how does this make me feel? What is showing up in my body and my nervous system as I process whatever I'm journaling about? So that might look like before I sit down to journal, maybe I do some very light breath work. Like maybe I do box breathing or 4-7-8 extended exhale breathing and just kind of get into my body and my nervous system a little more. And then I write, maybe I'm responding to a prompt if there's specific topics I'm wanting to work through, or maybe I let myself just free write, stream of consciousness, which is actually a great way to engage the subconscious mind. Big fan
Mm-hmm.
of that. And then you see what it brings up, what comes out. And on the flip side of that, maybe you notice that you need a little grounding, and so you try behavening. Or maybe you notice you need to like move energy through you. You're feeling a little jittery and anxious, and you want to discharge some energy. So maybe you get up and shake, like you just put your pen down and like shake out your wrists, shake out your arms, everything that just flowed through your hands into the page, shake that out as sort of this symbolic and literal letting it go, letting it out through the body. So that's a great way to sandwich what's normally a cognitive practice with some somatic practices to stay connected to the mind and body.
Mm, beautiful, beautiful. And you have a new book, or not? Is this your first book, or is it the new book?
Yeah, I've this is my first like book on my own. I have
Okay.
essays in other books, but this is my first book.
Okay, and it's called Choose Yourself. If you can give us a little taste of that, what is it about? It sounds juicy already.
Yeah, so choose yourself. I mean, it says on the cover how to embrace being single, heal core wounds, and build a life you love. So it of course sounds like it's targeted primarily towards single people, single women in particular. And I will say I've had a lot of people in relationship read the book who have shared they've gotten a lot out of it. I've had men read it who said they have gotten a lot out of it, but I did write the book primarily for women who are in that chapter of their life where maybe they're leaving an unhealthy relationship or a pattern of relationships that weren't quite right. Maybe they found that they were self-abandoning and, trying to get somebody else to choose them over choosing themselves first. And so the book is really this map, this guide to how to build that relationship with yourself from the ground up, how to identify those core wounds as well as your core values and who you are, what you really want, and to give a sense of empowerment and encouragement around periods of time in your life where you might be single, that can be the very best time in your life, contrary to what society might have us believe. So,
Hmm.
again, anybody who wants a deeper relationship with self will get a lot out of that book, but particularly if you're going through a breakup or if you're single and wondering when you're going to meet your person or navigating relationship patterns, it's definitely for that type of person.
Yeah, yeah. Being single in my 30s has been like it's been a golden era.
It's the best. And like 20 something me would not have believed that.
Right.
She would have been
Right.
like, absolutely not. That's terrifying.
Yeah, yeah. Or 20 something me, I was more avoidant. So even if I wasn't in a relationship, that it was just
Mm-hmm.
like that pattern was like dominating everything and that it was
Mm-hmm.
a different intention. But yeah, I love that. So thank you so much for sharing your book and thank you so much for being on the show and giving us all of your wisdom and your energy. And feel free to connect with Megan. We have her website in the description. It's Megan Sheer. MEGANSHERER.com. And we also have our Instagram linked as well. And I think there might be a link to the book that looks like a hyperlink there. So, yeah, a great stuff. Any last words of wisdom? It could be a quick quote, a book recommendation other than yours, whatever you want to leave us with, and then we'll close out.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Vanessa. I really loved this conversation and hope everybody who is listening has gotten something that they need out of it. Um, the last thing that I'll share and leave everybody with is something that I say over and over again in the work that I do. Probably a good way to bookend what we've been talking about. And it's just a reminder that love is who you are. It's not
Mm.
something that you earn or have to achieve or perform for. It's just who you are. And the sooner we remember that, the easier love will feel.
I love that. And that like goes for full circle with how we
Yeah.
opened up this conversation today.
Very poetic.
I love how when that happens, it's so beautiful. Well, thank you again. Namaste, everyone. Have a great day.